Don Mazzella here, again for Small Business Digest. And we have a guest. I have a friend, Jiggy Lowe, on his program, always says he has great guests. But in this case, I think we really do. Brent Johnson is head of Clarus, a company I always mispronounce. And he's here to talk about taxation, which we all hate. I just saw a cartoon about said, let's send billionaires to someplace they've never been, the tax office. But that's another story. Um, uh, Brent, welcome to the program.
Don, thanks for having me. I think we'll have an interesting discussion today.
Well, hopefully you can help. I know I'm totally confused by the tax implication of all these programs. But before we get into that, I'd love to hear a little bit about your personal background, a little bit about your company, and finally a website.
Great. Yeah. Hey, my name is Brent Johnson. I'm a tax geek by nature. I've been working in the tax field for 30 years. I started as a CPA, grew up professionally at Deloitte, working primarily with large corporate taxpayers. I then went on into industry and ran the tax department for a large multi-billion-dollar corporation in Central Ohio. I live in Central Ohio, Columbus. It's kind of my home. And then started Clarus about 10 years ago, initially focused on working with middle market taxpayers to do some more sophisticated tax planning and put in place more robust tax plans for those businesses. But there have been a number of changes over the last 10 years that have made incentives a really important topic, and something that historically only large corporate taxpayers participated in. But there have been a number of changes that have made these available to small and middle market businesses in a way they've never been available before. And COVID really accelerated that pretty dramatically as the government had a need to get dollars out to employers. And so it's a relevant topic right now, one that I've been focused on exclusively for about 7 years now.
Okay, and your website for people?
Yeah, two websites. One is claruswotc.com. That's CLARUSWOTC.com. And that website is focused on the Work Opportunity Tax Program, which is an employment-based tax incentive program. A second is clarusrd.com. That's CLARUSRD.com. And that website is focused on research and development tax credits.
Well, I'll tell you, Brent, the reason we asked you on this program is in our studies and when we talk to small business people, they indicate to us, some of them take thousands, in some cases, hundreds of thousands of dollars in incentives for these various programs. And they ask the question, what do I pay and what do I not pay? And how do I make some choices? So hopefully you can at least start us on the road to clarifying it, understanding that each individual case, but in general. So the floor is all yours.
Yeah, so tax incentives are a very niche space. And the fundamental premise around thinking about tax incentives for your business is the old adage, is the juice worth the squeeze, right? Hey, there are dollars available to your business, very likely at the federal or state and local level. The question is always, hey, is what I have to do in order to get those dollars worth it? Are they practical? And that's where incentives generally have made have made a lot of strides in the last 10 years. There have been some significant changes making them easier to administer, and more available to smaller employers. But first off, you have to start with understanding what really is the purpose of an incentive. Why does the government put them out there and make them available to businesses and employers? And it's really to drive one of three things. It's to drive employment, to drive research and innovation, or to drive capital investment. One of those three basic topics. All of those can generally be thought of as economic development tools. And so if your business is hiring people, there's a very good chance there's some type of program that will make sense. If you're developing new products and services that are based on one of the four hard sciences, then hey, you're doing research and development that will likely qualify you for the R&D credit. And if you're making a significant capital investment in your business, there are tax incentives that may make sense. Our business is focused really on the first two, because hiring people and developing new products or services is something that businesses do year in, year out. They do it every day in their business. Capital investments tend to be more one-time things. If I'm going to open up a new office, move my headquarters, those kinds of things, it's not something that happens each and every year in a business. But the first two are. And the programs at a federal level prior to COVID, and then we'll talk a little bit about how COVID impacted things, but there are really two programs at the federal level that are really significant. From the employment-based incentive perspective, it's the Work Opportunity Tax Credit. And this is a program that is intended to help create job opportunities for folks that have limited work skills. And so there's 9 categories of worker or 9 categories of employee that could qualify your business for hiring them. And they tend to be folks that are hard to hire. So folks that are coming off public assistance, people with some type of disability, veterans that have been unemployed for a period of time. Like I said, there's 9 different categories, but if you hire somebody that falls into one of those 9 different categories, you can get a credit for what you pay that person, equal to up to 40% of what you pay that person, capped at most of the categories are capped at $2,400, but there's one in particular, a disabled veteran, that could get you $9,600 for hiring that person. And those credits can be quite significant if your business relies on a lot of kind of entry-level manual labor. I'll call it minimum wage jobs up to about $20 an hour. If you're in that category, probably, certainly 15 to 20% of your workforce is going to fall in one of those categories. And if you screen effectively for them, you can start to capture those credits. This is something that Target, Walmart, and McDonald's have done forever, and it helps them control their labor costs. Smaller businesses have always had a difficult time participating, but technology has really changed that such that the screening process can be done very, very easily in today's world, whereas 10 years ago, that really wasn't the case. And so that's the major employment-based tax incentive program at the federal level. For research and innovation, the United States has a research and development tax credit, which essentially says that if you develop new products or services that rely on one of the 4 hard sciences, then money that you spend in developing that new product or services, a portion of it is creditable. It ends up working out to about 10% of what you spend developing that new product or services. You can get back in the form of a research and development tax credit. There's documentation that has to be done. and we have developed software which helps make the accumulation of that that documentation very easy, and makes the process less costly, and easier to administer. So, those are the two federal level programs that are really significant. And you're seeing more and more small and middle market employers participate in those programs.
But Brent, let me ask you a question. All of this money that they poured into COVID, into restaurants, and let alone the airlines, we won't even talk about them. But in small businesses, I know a restaurant down the street got $97,000 in PP, whatever it is.
PPP?
Yeah. And my question is, do they pay tax on it? Is it they've been told by some people that that money will never be repaid, and they'll never have to repay it, and they won't have to tax. But can you talk a little bit about that?
Of course. So, hey, I covered initially, hey, here's the three things that government really focuses on in order to give incentive dollars, and covered really the two major federal programs that have been out there for a long time pre-COVID. COVID changed everything. And the impact of COVID on small businesses has been well documented. It was significant. It really, really hurt and killed a lot of businesses. But the government, in the response, very quickly tried to get dollars out to employers with the purpose of keeping employees on the payroll. The first program of substance that they rolled out was the Paycheck Protection Program, and most folks at this point are pretty familiar with the Paycheck Protection Program. It was a program where essentially you could get about 2.5 months worth of payroll. If you kept your basic business infrastructure in place and people on payroll, you could get that money forgiven. In fact, even if you cut back a lot of your payroll, you were able to get most or all of that money forgiven. That money was not taxable. So you got a loan that you didn't have to pay back, and the receipt of that cash was not taxable by law. That was a specific provision in the CARES Act. And there were specific dollars allocated to that program. And so when the money ran out, the money ran out. And so there was also a lot of publicity, of course, around better connected businesses, those with more established banking relationships, getting access to those funds more easily than businesses with less established banking relationships, because the program was administered through the SBA and through banks. But by and large, the program was very, very successful. It got a lot of dollars out to a lot of different employers, helped a lot of people keep their doors open. However, there was a sister program that came out at the same time, still as part of the CARES Act, which is called the Employee Retention Tax Credit. And this program, initially, as the law was drafted, was only available to employers who did not take a PPP loan. And so for the most part, that was larger businesses with more than 500 employees, and not a lot of small and middle market businesses participated during 2020. However, as the pandemic went on and stretched into 2021, Congress made some changes to the program at the end of 2021, and the most significant change was that they lifted the restriction on participation in both the Paycheck Protection Program and the Employee Retention Tax Credit Program. And they did so retroactively, meaning that you could go back and during 2020 and claim credits that you as an employer were now eligible for that you weren't eligible for earlier in 2020 because of that restriction. They also made some really significant enhancements to the program for 2021. I can cover a little bit of that. It might get a little time consuming to get into the details, but the gist of it is this, is that restaurant that you referenced that got $97,000 out of a PPP, the PPP program, probably had, at least 50%, maybe 75 to 80% that much also available to it through this employee retention program, employee retention tax credit program. We found very few businesses that did not participate in the PPP program, but we have found that not very few. At this point, we're finding that about 30% of the conversations we have with relevant businesses like restaurants, about 30% of the time they've claimed the credit, which means 70% of the time, even though they're eligible, they really haven't. And so there's not nearly as much knowledge of or participation in that employee retention tax credit program as there was in the PPP program.
Oh, okay. We have about 10 or 15 minutes left. What would you like to talk to at this point, Brent?
Well, as I indicated, hey, the basics of incentives are employment, innovation, and capital investment. Employment was hugely negatively impacted by COVID, and the labor markets have been changed drastically as a result of how COVID impacted not only employers, but also employees. The availability of workforce at this point for many businesses is limited. They're having a hard time finding people. I think most everybody has experienced excessive wait times at restaurants, service that struggles because they're understaffed, and that's a labor shortage issue. So incentives, the way that Congress tries to help businesses deal with those problems is through incentives. And so if your business has been effective in participating in the Paycheck Protection Program, great. That created a lot of economics for your businesses that can help you deal with those labor issues. If you haven't participated in the employee retention tax credit but are eligible, that is also significant dollars that are available to you, that have been made available to you, that can help you deal with those labor issues. Everybody's experiencing inflation in the wages that they pay, and so those two programs are two significant opportunities for businesses to deal with those economics. The third is the work opportunity tax credit. And so while the dollars don't end up being as significant generally in that program, it's ongoing. And so if you can, you're going to have to, employers are going to have to, as they try to bring workers back, look into labor pools that they maybe have not in the past. And some of those labor pools will be eligible for this work opportunity tax credit. All that being said, is COVID changed things. The world changed when COVID hit. And whereas past economic crisis, Congress's response was really focused on a few big industries like airlines and banks, businesses that were very large and had sophisticated tax departments that could help participate. The scope of the businesses that were impacted by COVID was massive. All businesses in some form or fashion were impacted by COVID, and they don't tend to have those sophisticated tax groups that can help them participate. If you're effective, if you are effective in understanding how incentive programs work and how your business can benefit from them, it can be a significant aid to you during difficult times like this.
But Brent, how can your company help a small business?
So we help in a couple of ways. The first is just creating understanding, help you understand just what I talked about. Hey, what are the programs that are available? And the second is administration. So once you understand the programs that are available to you, doing the paperwork, doing the administration in a way that is straightforward and compliant is important. And so we've developed software for each of these programs that helps make that easy. And because these are things that you do every day in your business, how you plug those systems into how you operate makes it significantly easier. So, we provide software which helps employers stay compliant, and understanding which helps them to know when they should be paying attention.
Okay, before we go further, your website again for people, your two websites.
Yes, so the first is Clarus, Clarus, WOTC, WOTC.com. And the second is Clarus RD, CLARUSRD.com.
Okay, so in effect, you're saying that a small business owner that has questions and wants to participate can go to your website and, in effect, learn a lot and have the tools.
Yeah,
Am I
and there's
hearing
ways
right?
you are, and you can interact with folks that can answer questions on the website. And if it seems like something that makes sense for your business, schedule an appointment to talk to somebody that can help you understand how to participate.
Mm. And how do you work, on a fee basis, on a monthly basis, subscription? How do you work?
We're a contingent fee basis provider, and so you don't pay anything if you don't get any money. And those percentages range from as low as 8% up to about 20%, depending on size of the program, size of the employer, essentially.
Okay, so I want to be clear on this because we almost backed into it. But so I'm a small business. I think I can participate in one or another of these programs, but I haven't been helped by my bank, which is really where you start first. But banks are notorious for
Well, the banks, yeah, I mean, to be clear, the banks help with the PPP program. They were kind of the gatekeeper for that money. And that program's pretty well wound down. I mean, there's not a lot that you can do with the PPP program right now, but these tax incentive programs go through generally either your CPA, or a tax specialist like us. There's a lot of CPAs that can help with this, but many really, particularly small and middle market CPAs, if they didn't kind of grow up professionally, so to speak, in an environment where they did large corporate taxes, they probably didn't participate in these programs very much. And so that's kind of where we come in, is to help those businesses whose CPAs may be very effective at helping with their books and doing their taxes, but really don't have the background or expertise in terms of tax incentives.
But I'd like to get back to one thing on the research and development side. If always happens.
No problem.
Yeah. Um, in the research and development, if I spend 2 years with my company developing, let's say I'm having someone on who developed a machine to mix cocktails.
Mm-hmm.
Is any of that money that I spent in the research, am I able to take it off my taxes, or is that not the type of program?
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you developed a machine to do that, you've engaged engineers. You may have engineers on staff that help design that product, and certainly they if in designing that product, they went through a process of research and development and eliminated uncertainty around how to best build that product. It doesn't mean that they didn't know pretty clearly up front that they could design that product, but that how to best design that product will qualify for the R&D credit. And just roughly, probably 10% of the dollars spent in the development of that product will come back in the form of a credit. So it's not a deduction, it is a tax credit, which means it's a dollar for dollar offset to your tax bill, which makes it as good as cash. It essentially reimburses that company for about 10% of the cost of developing that product.
I'm going to say one more. So you can go to your website again, Brent?
So the research and development website is clarusrd.com. And the employment-based tax incentive website is claruswatsi.com.
Brent, we only have a couple of minutes left. What would you like to leave our audience with?
Hey, look, the world changed as a result of COVID. Incentives have become an important part of how the government supports your business. And I think it will continue to do so in the future. If you don't have tax incentives as part of your overall tax plan, I'd encourage you to think about how you might be able to make that happen. Okay,
Brent, on that note, we say thank you for me, an illuminating time. I hope our audience did as well. Thank you.
Don, thanks so much for having me. It's an interesting conversation.